Okay, let's dive straight in. We're taking a look today at some really powerful and, well, complex excerpts from Salman Rushdie's novel, The Satanic Verses.
That's right.
You've given us this stack of material, bits of the story, character moments, ideas kind of wrestling with each other on the page.
Yeah, it's a very rich, dense collection,
Yeah.
and it really just throws you into this world where reality seems to bend and shift quite a bit.
So our mission with this deep dive.
Our mission, yeah, is to work through these pieces you've got,
Yep.
unpack what they seem to be revealing, and maybe pull out some of the key insights, the surprising nuggets that help make sense of this sometimes wild and challenging narrative.
Think of it as a guided exploration, just for you listening. We're going to navigate through some of the, let's say, core landscapes presented in these sources, highlighting what seems most important to maybe understand and think about.
Okay,
Let's unpack this.
let's do it.
Right from the very start, I mean, the material throws us into chaos, doesn't it? This incredibly vivid, disorienting scene. We've got Gibreel Farishta, the famous actor, and Saladin Chamcha, the voiceover artist. They're literally falling from the sky after a plane gets destroyed.
Yeah, it's immediate, it's dramatic, and it's utterly surreal.
Totally.
Like,
And that fall, it immediately leads to one of the book's central ideas we see in these pages. Transformation.
absolutely. Saladin Chamcha, this man who's like spent his life trying to erase his Indian background, become fully English. He starts to physically change.
In this really bizarre way.
Yeah, bizarre is the word. He begins to take on this goat-like form.
A goat. The material really doesn't shy away from the grotesque, does it?
Not at all. And his journey then takes him to this incredibly strange place. It's described as a mysterious institution or maybe a detention center.
Feels like a hospital, maybe a prison,
Yeah.
but definitely otherworldly.
And he's not the only one there undergoing these sorts of changes. The sources you gave us mention other transformed beings he runs into.
Right.
Figures with tiger heads, people turning into plants, giant insects, even folks who seem to be made of, like brick or stone.
Wow. It's a real gallery of the uncanny, almost a ward of nightmares, I think the material calls it.
That's the exact phrase, yeah.
Okay.
Which is how it's described as Chamcha eventually escapes this place,
Yeah.
helped by a woman named Hyacinth Phillips.
And the very act of leaving feels like a struggle, doesn't it? Towards something else, maybe back to a recognizable world. But clearly that experience leaves him fundamentally altered.
Yeah, and what this whole opening sequence in your sources does immediately is establish that identity isn't fixed. Not at all. Reality itself is unstable. It's permeable to these bizarre, often, inexplicable changes. It sets a tone for the whole narrative, really, where the lines between the real, the dream, the fantastical, they're constantly dissolving.
Makes you question what's solid ground in this story.
Exactly.
Absolutely. And speaking of blurring lines, the material then takes this sharp turn, doesn't it? Plunges us from that bizarre opening into a different time altogether.
Seemingly an ancient, sort of mythologized past.
Yeah, and here we meet figures like Mahound, who's presented as a prophet receiving revelation, referred to as the Wahi.
Right. This section draws on clearly reimagined historical and religious narratives. We see the dynamic between Mahound and the established power structure of Jahilia.
Embodied by figures like Abu Simbel the Grandee and his wife, Hind.
Yeah, and it's framed as this fundamental struggle, between a new message and the existing order.
And the sources even introduce the poet, Baal,
Yes.
who's actually commissioned by Abu Simbel to write verses against Mahound and his followers. He's literally told, write about them and their leader, too.
So even art creativity gets enlisted in this conflict. And this is where the title of the book itself comes up in the sources. We find that reference to the Satanic Verses.
Right.
Verses Mahound initially receives as revelation, but then later repudiates, acknowledging their, let's say, questionable origin.
And his bitterness about this is really striking in the material. He says something like, it was a wonderful thing I did. Deeper truth. Bringing you the devil. Yes, that sounds like me.
Yeah, that complex moment suggesting doubt or maybe even cynicism. That's a key insight from these particular passages, I think.
And following this, Mahound's followers face intense persecution. The material describes them being, segregated, subjected to curfews, banned from working.
Physically attacked, too. Women spat upon, believers manhandled. It's quite brutal.
Yet, paradoxically, the material notes that the community actually grows stronger under this pressure.
Which leads eventually to an offer of refuge from the oasis settlement of Yathrib.
And that huge decision to migrate.
And the sources even show us complexity within the believers themselves, like Kali the water carrier,
Right, he confesses his own doubt after the whole repudiation thing.
but ultimately finds a deeper truth in it, seeing it as revealing the devil's influence at work.
Yeah.
So it's not simple faith.
Interesting. And interwoven with all this ancient history, there's that surreal dream sequence involving the imam figure and the Empress Alat.
Yeah, filled with these powerful symbolic images, smashing clocks, this idea of untime.
So that thread highlights how the past isn't just history, right? It's alive. It's colliding with the present in these characters' minds.
Especially in Gibreel's visions.
Yeah.
Keeps recurring.
Okay, so moving to another really distinct landscape revealed in your material, we find ourselves in the village of Titlipur.
Right. Centered around this mansion called Paristan.
And this place is defined by butterflies.
Yes, the butterflies are absolutely central here. The sources tell us they were associated with a local saint, BBG, then they disappeared, only to return and become first ordinary, then miraculous again. It's this ebb and flow of the miraculous appearing and receding. It's a fascinating pattern we see.
And then there's Aisha, this silver-haired girl literally followed by swarms of these butterflies.
Seen as BBG's successor, embodying this renewed sense of the divine, or maybe the miraculous.
And she receives a vision, according to the sources.
From the archangel Gibreel, no less.
Right. Based on this, she announces a pilgrimage commanded by divine will. The whole village is to walk to Mecca to kiss the black stone.
And that really sets the stage for the events in this whole section.
Your material gives us the perspective of Mirza Said Akhtar, the Zamindar of Paristan. His wife, Mishal, is dying but insists on joining the pilgrimage.
Yeah, he loves her deeply. He's despairing over her decision, tries desperately to stop her.
But ultimately ends up just following the group from a distance in his car.
And the pilgrimage itself is portrayed as incredibly difficult. The sources mention the suffering thirst, the unsettling presence of vultures circling overhead.
And as they approach this suburb, Sarang, they face intense opposition.
Yeah, communalist groups stirring up coal miners. You get these banners shouting, "No Islamic pediatra, butterfly witch, go home!"
It's a real collision, isn't it? Faith, fear of the unknown, perceived magic, local politics.
Absolutely. Yeah. And amidst this conflict, some people actually defect from the pilgrimage. They seek what the sources call neutral status.
Like Srinivas, a toy merchant who follows Lakshmi, and Mrs. Qureshi, Mishal's mother.
Yeah, they join Mirza Said in his car. It shows these different responses to the sheer intensity of the journey.
And then comes this absolutely extraordinary event, which is recounted through multiple perspectives in the material, a sea parting.
Yes. The sources give us testimonies from the Sarpanch, Osman the Bullock Boy, Srinivas, Mrs. Qureshi, all swearing they witnessed the water divide.
Even under questioning, the Sarpanch insists, "I still saw what I saw."
It's powerful.
Yeah.
And this whole section culminates in Mirza Said's final moments.
He sees butterflies, feels the sea pour over him, witnesses Aisha stepping out of Mishal's body.
His struggle to open, the splitting of his body, and then the sea parting for them to walk across. These are incredibly vivid, symbolic moments.
It's a scene where intense personal emotion, mystical vision, and this apparent miracle all converge in a deeply moving way. So from that almost fantastical pilgrimage, the material shifts gears dramatically, bringing us back to the grittier reality of London.
Focusing back on Saladin Chamcha after his transformation and escape from that bizarre institution.
Right. We see him interacting at the Shandar Cafe, which is depicted as this gathering place for immigrants.
Yeah, with characters like Haji Sufyan, Hind, Anahita, Hanif Johnson. It offers a glimpse into community, but also the tensions, the prejudices within it.
Hind's reactions to Chamcha's changed form are particularly telling, aren't they? The material describes her seeing it as an elephant man illness and expressing her own frustrations, her prejudices about being stuck in this country full of Jews and strangers who lumped her in with the Negroes.
It paints a really complex picture of identity and bias, even within the immigrant experience itself. It's not monolithic.
No. There's also discussion around the Granny Ripper murders, which the sources connect to heightened racial tensions in the city.
Yeah, the focus falls onto perceived occultism among the city's blacks, which leads to the arbitrary detention of tints. It's a stark depiction of the institutional prejudice and profiling described in the material.
And the sense of systemic distrust is explored even further in that scene, involving Pamela, Jumpy, and Antoinette Roberts, Uhuru Simba's mother.
Right, where she presents that briefcase containing what's described as extensive evidence of the existence of witches' covens throughout the Metropolitan Police.
I mean, that speaks to a profound breakdown of trust, doesn't it, between the community and the authorities?
Absolutely. And Chamcha's own reflections on Simba's posthumous speech, they reveal his discomfort with certain kinds of protest language, like uppity nigger.
Yeah, the material shows him questioning that idea of different histories being interchangeable. He seems to want to maintain distinctions, even within the broad strokes of struggles against oppression.
Meanwhile, his personal life, his relationship with his English wife, Pamela, is clearly fraught after his experience. Their reunion, as it's presented in these passages, is just strained and awkward.
Yeah. And your material also includes that phone call between Chamcha and his agent Mimi Mamoulian.
Ah, Mimi, yes. She explains her choices, describes herself as entering flatland, which is presented as this metaphor for a kind of commodified superficial reality.
Doing it knowingly for money.
Right. She mentions her relationship with Billy Batuta, who she says knows the score, and there's this definite sense that her connection with Chamcha had drifted apart.
We also meet Hal Valance, who represents another kind of perspective within this London tapestry.
He hears these views on British genius, citing things like using flight for missile guidance.
And discusses Margaret Thatcher's policy of intentionally creating a whole goddamn new middle class, calling it a bloody revolution.
Right. Yeah, and the material also notes his unexpected, almost contradictory talent for making clavichords. These little details.
They add layers.
Yeah.
And weaving through all of this London stuff are Gibreel's experiences.
Right. The material shows his visions really intensifying, seeing demons, urban decay, grappling internally with this concept of fallen angels.
And that difficult choice between what's called infernal love and celestial adoration.
Exactly. He even attempts this grand gesture, doesn't he? Presenting himself on the horizon to Londoners in this moment of radiant glory.
But the material describes him being just ignored by a people who had forgotten how to see.
It's such a powerful, melancholy image of modernity's apparent indifference to the miraculous or the divine, isn't it?
Definitely. Which leads us, I suppose, to the complex, often turbulent relationship between Gibreel Farishta and Alleluia Cone Ali.
The sources describe their connection as incredibly intense, almost destined dream lovers. Unbelievable together is the phrasing.
But also deeply troubled by Gibreel's visions, his instability.
And Ali, she's a former climber, she's portrayed as determined to see it through. Her goal, according to these passages, is to confront Gibreel's mad angelic divinity and help him reclaim his humanity.
She's trying to anchor him.
Yeah. But her mother, Alicia Cohen, is deeply skeptical. The material shows her seeing Gibreel as simply mentally ill.
Suggesting interventions like a padded cell or trying to burn the devils out of his brain.
Right. And she questions Ali's belief in destiny being tied to character, arguing instead that in the modern world, destiny is shaped by history, economics, and bombs. Much more deterministic.
Yeah. The sources include that really difficult scene where Gibreel, in a moment of intense vision or sickness,
he confesses to hitting Ali because he perceived her as a demon.
And the material notes Ali's act of self-defense in that moment, highlighting the very real physical danger his mental state creates.
And Gibreel's jealousy, too, is presented as a significant part of his manifesting sickness, leading to accusations directed at Ali as his grasp on reality weakens.
So a key point where many of these threads seem to converge is that big party depicted in the material.
Right, held at the Shepperton Film Studios, within a recreation of Dickensian London, of all places.
It's a space where so many characters, Gibreel, Ali, Chamcha, are brought together.
And for Chamcha, spotting Gibreel at this party is presented in the sources as the very purpose of his journey up to that point. It's pivotal for him.
His emotional state at the party is described as, isolated, heavy drinking.
Yeah, and he views Gibreel so bitterly, seeing him as the sum of Saladin's defeats. It just underscores that deep rivalry between them.
Okay, so finally, your material brings us to the powerful climax, shifting the scene back to Bombay.
Saladin Chamcha returns, prompted by the imminent death of his father, changes Chamchawala.
The sources include that poignant scene at Change's funeral, where Saladin's foot gets trampled in the rush.
Yeah, and his reflection on laying his father to rest, specifically noting the weight of my father's head lying in my hand. It's very physical, very grounding.
Back in Bombay, Saladin talks to Zini and hears these disturbing rumors about Gibreel's increasingly erratic behavior.
And the material describes him feeling his old life prick him, recognizing the reemergence of these past conflicts and connections. He can't escape it.
The reports on Gibreel in Bombay are really alarming, aren't they? They paint this picture of rapid decline.
Totally. The sources describe him as being on a suicide course, making bizarre, controversial movies like that modern Ramayana remake where the traditional heroes are corrupt.
Leading to career troubles, accusations of blasphemy, Satanism.
Yeah, Pimple Billamoria reportedly calls him the devil. The material mentions the return of his sulfurous halitosis, his erratic public behavior, demanding people kneel before him.
It gets worse, too. The sources report tax investigations, police questions about the earlier death of Rekha Merchant.
Who fell from the same building where Ali later dies.
Exactly. Threats from Rekha's husband and these disturbing rumors of visits to the red light district where women were found very badly damaged.
It's a grim picture. And then comes the devastating news reported in the material. The deaths.
SS Sisodia, found with a hole through the heart, and Alleluia Cone, who fallen to her death from the roof of the skyscraper.
And Ali's death is explicitly linked by the news reports to Rekha Merchant's earlier fall from the same building. They call it the Curse of Everest Vilas.
Gibreel then vanishes and is immediately under suspicion.
And the sources offer this glimpse into his fragmented internal state through that monologue following the deaths.
It's chilling.
Yeah, in this tormented passage, Gibreel offers a partial confession: I shot him in the heart, referring to Sisodia. But for Ali, he insists, I didn't push her, claiming Rekha pushed her.
He talks about his sickness, the influence of the verses in his head.
And that terrifying thought that vengeance is sought for the crime of being human, especially female. It's just a raw, fractured insight into his unraveling mind, as presented in these pages.
The material builds then to the final confrontation, set against the backdrop of the burning Shandar Cafe back in London.
Right. Gibreel arrives, sees Chamcha there, and the sources earlier mentioned Gibreel's disturbing use of that trumpet, Azrael.
The exterminator.
Capable of consuming men in fire. Yeah. So in this final interaction, amidst the flames, Gibreel confronts Chamcha with these questions like, what happens when you win? And why'd you do it? Reflecting cynically on humanity as crazy bastards.
And Chamcha, injured and trapped, offers this desperate plea for forgiveness and pity, rendered in the sources as just fragmented sounds. Fa, gur, ha, ba.
The fire is raging, but then the material describes this pivotal moment for Gibreel.
He drops the trumpet.
Yeah, the trumpet of destruction. He frees Chamcha from a fallen beam, lifts him as the fire surrounds them. It's this act of unexpected, incredibly difficult compassion amidst all the chaos.
But as the fire catches his coat, Chamcha's last words, according to the sources, are simply, it's too late.
And the material ends right there, with police arriving at Chamcha's location. Just cut.
Wow. Okay. What an intense journey through just these pieces of this incredibly dense and layered narrative. We've seen transformations, literal and metaphorical, ancient conflicts echoing right into the present, dreams and visions blurring, sometimes violently, with reality.
And characters grappling so profoundly with who they are, what they believe, the very nature of good and evil. It's huge stuff.
From figures falling from the sky and others apparently walking on water, from divine inspiration maybe twisted by something else, to the harsh realities of prejudice and identity in a modern city, these sources offer just a dizzying array of images and ideas.
They throw the fantastical and the mundane into sharp, often really shocking juxtaposition.
This deep dive into your material really highlights a world where the extraordinary constantly erupts into ordinary lives, doesn't it? Pushing characters, and maybe us, as we try to understand these pages, to question what's truly real, what's true.
And where responsibility lies, when forces beyond comprehension seem to be at play, it's unsettling.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though, I think. Amidst all the chaos, the cruelty, the suffering depicted in these passages, we also find these unexpected moments of connection, forgiveness, even sacrifice, like Gibreel's final act towards Chamcha. What does it mean when these fundamental acts of human compassion appear in the most extreme circumstances?
That's a great question. It complicates everything, doesn't it?
It does. So what does this all mean for you as you continue to navigate your own sources of information in a world that, let's face it, can sometimes feel just as strange and overwhelming? How do you discern meaning, find moments of truth or connection when you're faced with conflicting narratives and experiences that defy simple explanation?
Yeah, it's tough. Perhaps, as these sources powerfully suggest, the ultimate lesson isn't about finding easy answers or some single fixed reality.
Maybe not.
It might be more about recognizing the complexity, maybe embracing the contradictions, and just observing the persistent, unpredictable nature of the human spirit, for better or for worse, in the face of the inexplicable.
There's always more to see.
Exactly. Even when the world feels like it's making you forget how.